Hello, fabulous friends, fans, and superstars. Welcome to Synchronicity Web TV. I am your host, Nadiya Shah, and this is your moment of synchronicity. Well, I'm so excited to celebrate with you today, Stephen Poplin. Now, Stephen is amazing. He is a transpersonal astrologer. He is a hypnotherapist. We're going to have so much to talk about just before we even started recording. I mean, our conversations were just flowing, and I was like, okay, we got to get this on camera. So I know we're going to have a lot of fun and talk about a lot of interesting things, but also know that Stephen is coming to Synchronicity University as part of the November 2025 speaker series. I had to check the date there for a moment, but yes, November 2025. And as this is publishing, you've got just a little time left to choose your tuition rate. There's always just $5 a class to learn from Stephen and these other incredible astrologers as part of a jam-packed speaker series. Lots to talk about with Stephen for sure. Stephen, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Nadiya. It's a pleasure.
I think it's going to be a wonderful conversation. I think that you are so brilliant. And I would love to ask you just first and foremost, because you describe yourself as a transpersonal astrologer and a spiritual hypnotherapist. So, hypnotherapist, rather. So, how would you describe those terms for people who might not know?
Um, it was one of those things that kind of came upon me organically just by following my curiosity. And I can say that I first of all got into astrology when the planet Uranus transited my sun in Scorpio. It was the exact conjunction. And then suddenly it's like, oh, there's, these things outside of normal psychology and philosophy, which I was very into at the time. And then the wonderful synchronicity that happened during that one very powerful week, showed me that there's something going on outside of what was deemed just how life was. And of course, Uranus is the great awakener, right? And so it was like, the lightning coming down and says, well, how about tarot cards? What about metaphysics, symbology? Have you heard of reincarnation? All of this was like coming at me, but then I knew it after, actually a couple of years later, when I calculated and said, oh my goodness, Uranus was right on top of my sun. It's really quite perfect, and my sun being in Scorpio. So when I am dealing with people with various types of questions, issues, concerns, and so forth, like many astrologers, I'm going to be, calculating the chart, taking a look at transits, and especially when someone wants to move. And I'm a big traveler like you, and so going all over the world and wondering, about astrolocality, astrocartography, are there planetary dynamics in other places, upon the globe? And so I'll look at that, but I'll also look at other places far, far away in time, because as a hypnotherapist, we go into past lives. And so something that might be coming up as that looks like a transit of Neptune, let's say, could be taking us back 400 years when they, were a peasant, in Poland, and having to deal with something connected to a relationship at that time, which was very difficult, and it's showing up now, and so do the calculations. Wow, Neptune's very strong. Do hypnosis, past lives. Wow, cause and effect, karma with this particular person, and it makes a complete picture.
Wow. And it's interesting how there are these soul lessons that will arise again and again. I mean, lately I've been teaching a lot about past lives in astrology and the astrology chart in particular, how it shows up in your own journey, certainly. But I know that you're very passionate as a globetrotter like myself with world events as well. And so how do you see this showing up, this return, this awakening of spiritual lessons? How do you see that playing out in terms of countries or societies and what they might be going through?
Wow, yeah, great question too. And of course, it's especially important, this year, 2025, because just like humans, who have their past lives and they're kind of like meeting themselves in a karmic situation or a relationship. Nations are alive too. And so we have the birth charts of nations, like the USA, born on the 4th of July, 1776, Cancer country, and all that can be calculated. And nations can also have their transits and their Jupiter returns, and then the US having its Pluto return. And so I believe that what has been happening here very strongly for, I'm going to have to say, since about 2016. So it's 9 years now. It'll be probably a good 10, 11 years fully into this Pluto return, when Pluto came back to where it was at the beginning, at the inception of the United States. And so Pluto is oftentimes kind of seen as like a real big, heavy sort of thing. But we think about, even the word of plutocracy, it's being ruled by the wealthy. And we've got all these billionaires, showing up at the inauguration, and the president himself is a billionaire. So that's really interesting. But when Pluto was discovered in 1930, that was in the depths of the prohibition in the United States. And so the government had decided that the people will not be drinking alcohol. And so they're like telling their constituents basically, oh, we're going to play mama and papa here for you, and we're going to tell you what you can and cannot do. And of course that really backfired, and that created the mafia that says we're going to make alcohol anyway, we're going to have our speakeasies and so forth. And so it was the underworld. And isn't that a great, interesting word, the underworld, during the 1930s when Pluto was discovered? And boom, it was all quite perfect with all the mobsters and so forth. Well, that very same Pluto has come back into the United States consciousness. And so it is, besides having that Plutonian ruled by the wealthy dynamic, also the mobster thing, that, we're going to break the law and we don't care what you think, so get out of my way, buddy. It's so classic, mafia boss. Then on a cosmic level, it is a return and having the cosmic mirror being shown to not only the United States, but then to the world, that yes, is this like an anomaly? Is what's happening right now like really out of character? Not really, because we can go back in history and we can say, the United States has done a lot of pretty bad things. Take a look at what they did with the Native Americans, with the blacks, with slavery, with indentured servants, also with women. I mean, we have a long history of pretty difficult stuff going on here. And so it's not like to be taken, let's say, personally, but karmically, we are being faced as a people. This is you. This is what you have done. This is what you have done to other people. And now it's being done to you, because that's how karma works, right? Yeah,
That's
so that's
interesting.
pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, it's very cool. And I'm remembering how when Saturn was in Aquarius, it felt like, that was the whole Black Lives Matter movement, and it felt like we were really talking about a lot of these issues around systemic barriers and how to create greater equality. And it feels like with Saturn moved into Aries in particular. So that's one face of it, Saturn and Aries. Now dipping in and out this year, of course, with Pisces as well. But then, of course, Pluto in Aquarius more fully. It feels like there's almost been this very authoritarian rebuke of a lot of that stuff. But what do you think is symbolizing this astrologically, and where do you see that part of it going?
Well, that's also very interesting and pretty exciting for astrologers who are interested in mundane studies. And basically, Pluto is in about the same place that it was during the French Revolution. And that's when the people said, the rich, the wealthy, the monarchs, those living in their high styles, in an Aquarian manner, we're going to level you. You are out, buddies. And then came the French Revolution, and then there was a lot of people at the very top who lost their heads. But then all of the other monarchs were freaked out during that time, and they said, "Oh my goodness, if France can get free of the royalty, of the monarchy, maybe they'll do it in our countries too." And so then they all got together, and they said, we got to stop this. And then came Napoleon, and this is another interesting thing, right in his name, Napoleon, Leo, Aquarius opposite Leo. Okay, and so this guy with a very strong personality, a master of military arts and discipline, he whooped all their tails, at that time, and he was a force to be reckoned with. So he too, even though he was a Leo, he showed that Aquarian dynamic of he was very good at many different things, and he reviewed and improved the laws, even called the Napoleonic Code, even today, and made really interesting excursions into Egypt and Egyptology and studying, the past and archaeology and so forth. So more than just a great, military commander, he was really like a Renaissance man in a sense. And that is also the Pluto Aquarius thing. Aquarius, fixed air, great minds, thinking things through. But then he was, the Plutonian. He was a dangerous fellow. He brought a lot of people to their knees, and then ultimately, of course, he was exiled. Okay, so that's that energy that Pluto is again in Aquarius right now. And so we've got some people, and I'm thinking more like leaders, and they're already in their positions of power. And so they're going to start thinking, I've got to go the next level, the next step of my control. Okay. And they're going to have like a plan to do that. But it's Aquarius is also the sign of the people. And so there's going to be a response to that. Okay. So the strong-minded dictator types, Plutonian plutocrats are going to be up against the people. And that is where it's looking at right now. And then on top of it, right this year, 2025, and then 2026, we've got the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And whenever they get together, it's kind of like nicknamed the communist alignment, because whenever they get together from in our modern times, since 1846, whenever they got together, there's been these movements, of really strong-armed kind of Neptunian crazy types, who think, oh, ho, ho, da, da, we're sent here by God, and then they really do all sorts of things, and then there is a backlash, and then there is chaos. Interestingly enough, the last time that Saturn Neptune aligned was in 1989, and that was the fall of the Berlin Wall. The Soviet Union was falling apart. Many nations then became independent and free. I mean, this was a major political time of change. And that's what we're looking at right now, not only in the United States, but in many countries around the world. This is a time of change, reactions, revolutions, and this probably pretty well. When you think of Neptune, in a political sense, it could be bigger, and maybe we can do this and maybe we can do that, and and then onward Christian soldiers, when they have the religious dynamic of and God is on my side. No, God is on my side. So they've got that part of the Neptune, and then Saturn wants to codify it. Saturn wants to make it a thing, a lasting bit of machinery. But what happens ultimately is that this kind of like concentrated force connected to government and order is here trying to control Neptune. Good luck with that. And usually it's chaos and reaction and revolutions, and then ideology, because that's also Neptune. What do we believe in? What would we like to have in our nation? In the stratified codes of conduct in our cultures, Saturn. So that's what we're looking at right now. It's really quite a circus.
Quite a circus. I love how you put that. But yeah, it is fascinating because right now, like as you and I are speaking, there's this whole thing that a lot of people have been paying attention to, which is how Gen Z is rising up, right? Around the world, you're seeing Gen Z leading these movements, these rebukes of their governments. And it seems like it's working in many places, but I think that you could understand, and I'd love if you could speak to this because way back when we had Pluto square Uranus, right? We're looking at 2010, 2011, 2012. At the time, people were saying, the Arab Spring in particular, right, is part of what people were talking about. And what we had was people like sort of around the world, again, these youth driven movements sort of rising up and toppling their governments. And then once the people, right, the masses got a chance to vote, well, they ended up voting in governments, like even by margins of just 30%, but they ended up voting in governments that were even more conservative than there were before, right? That were really that much more standing up against the more equal vision that the young people were trying to bring forward in their societies. And to me, that was very much like that was Uranus square Pluto, because in a Uranus Pluto square, Pluto's much more dominant. Pluto's in Capricorn, no less. The power is going to exert itself. It's going to feel like it ends up winning. What do you see as different this time around?
Yeah, very good insights, Nadiya. And the Uranus-Pluto square, that of course was when Obama was president in the United States. And that was also when we had it legal for same-sex marriages. And so, classic, revolutionary ideals at that time. I'm thinking just about the United States, and at the same time that things, those things were happening, the other side, the more conservatives, were saying, "Oh my goodness, it's gone too far," and so then they started, pushing back, and then same thing with the Arab Spring. What a wonderful opportunity that was, in many different nations that were going to finally have their freedom, to overthrow usually monarchs or strongmen, and of course, back to that Napoleon idea that I was talking about before, that freaked out those who are also in control, usually monarchies or those, the higher hierarchies there. And then they are so clever and they're so used to, being in charge and knowing how to work with the military. And again, whether that be the Generation Z or whether that be just people who are kind of new to politics, they say we want to have freedom, but the old guard, they know how the system works. They know who to call. They know about the generals and the admirals and how to use, force, basically. So all that was part of it. When we had the 2016 election, that was also during the Uranus and Pluto. I was looking at it and said, very likely in the election, if we have a Uranian type, and we have a Plutonian type, it's going to be that's going to be the, who's going to go up for the election. And I said at the time, well, obviously the Uranian type was Bernie Sanders, right? And the Plutonian type was, of course, Trump. And here's a billionaire, so those were the two. But then Hillary Clinton she wasn't Uranian or Plutonian, even though she's a Scorpio. Um, she was neither. And so she was the one that was almost like the surprise card. I believe that if Bernie had been allowed, he probably would have beaten Trump. And so here we have from time to time these opportunities for us to collectively wake up and get real. And so often either we're outmaneuvered by the old guard, or there are sometimes obstacles, let's say, that get in the way. And bottom line, I guess, is that we evolve slowly.
Yeah, we do, don't we? We evolve slowly. And for some of us, it feels like it can't come fast enough, right? For some people. But uh, I think you're so right. For those changes to really take root, to really last, sometimes we have to be in it for the long haul. And sometimes the long haul means maybe we're setting the stage for future generations, maybe not necessarily in our own lifetimes, but that doesn't mean that future generations won't be able to have that. To at least, I mean, I'm thinking in particular, I can't tell you how many times I have felt such gratitude for, and I don't want to get, I can be very sappy, right? Because I do have a Cancer rising. Like my Aquarius sun and Sag moon is like, forget that. But then my Cancer rising gets all the feels, I'll tell you. And so sometimes I get really emotional when I think about these women who sacrificed, for me to be able to, take for granted the freedoms that I had and continue to have, really. I mean, I just think about so many women who sacrificed, some nothing less than their lives, and it is because of them. Some of them I might never know, that I'm able to have such a wonderful life today. So I feel very emotional when I think about that. But that is so true that sometimes our own lifetimes, we do the work because we think it's going to matter in the fullness of time, even if some part of us knows that fullness of time might not be in our own lifetime. And in particular, when we're looking at these big outer planets that take so long to go all the way around the zodiac, yeah, we really are doing the work for future generations, not only for ourselves and not necessarily for ourselves.
So true. Yes, yes. And I feel for you there too. My moon is in the fourth house. Yeah, so that Cancerian emotional sensitivity and just like, oh, it's too bad, I wish we were a bit more grown up.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I just feel a lot of gratitude, let me put it that way. And I can be sappy. So that's the thing, right? But I don't like that part of me because because my Sag moon and my Aquarius sun says, "Oh no, what are you doing? Why are you feel? It's just emotion." But then if I didn't feel it, I wouldn't be me. There's that other layer to it as well. And so I wanted to ask you, because I know I'm keeping you here a little bit and I appreciate you so, so much, but let me ask you about this idea of because you mentioned something happening in the late 90s, and I can't remember what it was that you mentioned, but some world changing type of celestial events that was taking place at the time. And I'm thinking about right now where we have, oh, yes, you were mentioning, sorry, forgive me. You were saying Uranus was conjunct something in your chart and you went through these big changes. And I was going to say, when Uranus conjuncted my sun towards the end of the 90s, that was when I saw the movie The Matrix. And that movie changed my life. Like it literally was absolutely life changing. I feel like I was on this path. And then in a moment, I was like, plucked off of the wet path and put on a whole other path. And it was so much of what you described, this idea of realizing that the things you always believed, it's not necessarily like that. And for me, it was like the things I always felt, but didn't even have the words for. It was like I was seeing it play out in metaphor on a screen, and it was just life changing. And so I wonder, we are right now having these Uranus collectively, anyways, right? Because, of course, a lot of us individually are having our transits, but collectively, we're having Uranus this year in particular in 2025, sextile Neptune, sextile Saturn, but it's next year that we are going to have I mean, this year it got mighty, mighty close, but not to the minute close, but mighty close to a trine with Pluto. And so I would love for you to just maybe explore or give me some insights into what you think 2026, this huge transit of not just Uranus trine Pluto, but Uranus will be sextiling Neptune at that time, will be sextiling Jupiter at that time as well, while it's trining.
And Uranus, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
we've got this huge, like whole larger configuration that some call the Great Sextile, some call the Minor Trine, some call it, like I've been calling it, the Near Star of David energy. We've got this big event coming up. So, what do you think is the role of Uranus in all of this? And secondly, what do you see as the larger role of this very special configuration?
Oh, very, very good, very interesting, and it's really quite a special time. If we were just looking at, let's say, the Saturn-Neptune alignment, and that is a big typhoon. It is a political extravaganza that's affecting many different countries, and many countries are looking at how socialist should we go, and can we really take the lofty ideals of Neptune and bring it down into a Saturnian governmental system. So that's like churning around in the background, right? And then we've got, like you said, we've got Uranus, and it's going into Gemini, making that really great trine here to Pluto and another air sign, Aquarius. And that same, Gemini to Aries, with the Saturn Neptune, I'm thinking, that's actually going to save us, because if we were just looking at kind of like the heaviness there, then it's like, okay, we're going to have a revolution, and there's going to be some blood, okay. But with the Uranian dynamic, it says that is a lot more of hope and ideals. And I was thinking here, as we've got this wonderful technology right here before us, we're using Zoom, and you're far away in another country, and here we are. If only during the Aquarian age, and I do believe that we are already in the Aquarian age, that if we could socially and governmentally keep up with technology, then things would be so much better. I mean, we've so many wonderful things with technology, jet planes, men on the moon. Here we have these, cyber toys here in front of us. So many technological sorts of things that's so Aquarian. Can't we, as a people in our systems, in our governments, can't we keep a pace with that? Can we keep up with, things that are like such a great innovation that, the old is now, it has to be retired because it's outdated, and if we could do that with also old thinking and systems, and says, well, that's a bit old. We've got something better here. And could be the hope of what these external planets with these positive aspects could bring to us. Probably some lifelines, some innovators, some geniuses who can really like take the microphone and say, here is another idea. It's a little bit like, you mentioned the Arab Spring, they could really expand like that, where there's sparks of hope and ideals, during this time, that there's confluence, this big political typhoon going on. And all the while, the old guard, the people who are pretty selfish, it's all about me, they're wanting to hold on. But then we've got these other voices. And if we can, again, take the microphone, and just say, we've got a better idea, we've got a loftier ideal, let's go in that direction and leave the old ideas behind and the old guard behind. And I think that is probably where it can go.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that makes so much sense to me. I'm thinking about how it's air, it's fire, right? That's where we're having all these energies. And that is so much about newness, the spark, the beginnings, especially with Neptune and Aries. And so it's so interesting how you put that together, especially adding the Uranian energy and how that might bring us something new as well. And my hope is that, and I think maybe you might have the faith in this too, that whatever it is uh, more equal, more just, more loving, more wise, more aligned with higher consciousness. And I think of higher consciousness as the recognition of the inherent divine in everyone and everything. That's what I think of when I think about higher consciousness. It's the awareness of that energy we call love within us, or the divine, or however you might understand it. But I'm a very spiritual girl, right? I can be very Neptune in that. And I get it that not everybody understands it that way, but yeah, my hope is that this very powerful energy helps us to align with that. The way you're understanding it is very political. And I think maybe I'm saying the same thing, but I'm just using a different language to make it a little bit more spiritual. But it is exciting to consider how we might participate in that unfolding. And so, just to finish off, what would your advice be? What can we do as individuals as part of, like, wanting to be part of something better to emerge? What role do we play? How can we go about it?
Wonderful. Yes. What's also happening is that the conjunction is kind of like when things are birthed. And the Uranus Pluto conjunction was in the 1960s. And that was quite a time, on many, many different levels, an exciting time. But it was also when, just in a short amount of time, we put a man on the moon. So technology meets inspiration, meets brilliance. And so when people get it together, amazing things can happen. And then from there, then we had that square that we were just talking about here in 2015, 2016. That's when they squared. And now they're coming towards a trine, next year. Okay. And a trine, as you know, is a lot smoother. It's easier. They can communicate. It doesn't have to be so revolutionary like the 1960s, although a little bit more sex and drugs and rock and roll is going to come back, of course.
Well, did it ever go away? Yeah, yeah.
No, it was planted and it's right here.
Yeah, yeah. Thank
So all of
goodness.
that is really quite hopeful. And with the trine, I'm hoping that the people with a vision, with a plan, that they will get opportunities to be on the podium, to share their vision, because there's other people that are kind of wanting to slow down the whole process, and they've got the microphone, they've got the stage, but they've got the wrong message. They're trying to bring us back, whereas this is very hopeful. And so we need to say, if someone has truly a vision, let them have the stage.
Incredible, incredible to contemplate. Exciting times we live in, that's for sure. So, Stephen, your talk as part of this upcoming speaker series, November 2025 at Synchronicity University, is going to be about rectification. Oh my goodness, this is such an important topic. Can you give us a definition of what rectification is?
Wonderful. Yes. And thank you for the opportunity to share that. It's something that has been very important for me, and it should be important for all astrologers, because you want to have an accurate chart. And I remember years ago, someone who, got right down not only to the degree and the minute, but then to the second. So he was very precise. So this is, the second, that someone was born. And then I said, but is the chart correct? Okay. Yeah, well, you could do the math, but it has to work. And I remember another time when I do astrocartography, and a woman came to me and she said, "I had my lines made for me. I went to move to Arizona following my lines, and I knew that my Jupiter line was there, and so I went to the university and I looked for a job. She wanted to do a teaching job. They didn't have a teaching job, but they had more of a maintenance position. And she did have that kind of a background too. So she ended up doing like really kind of a nuts and bolts type of job in that university. And then I go, okay, well, that's probably not what you thought about when you went over there. So we did her chart, we did the rectification, and that basically means getting to rectify or to make correct, to make it move right down to the exact minute of birth. Because, even on a birth certificate, it could have been written down after they had the coffee break. And so maybe 10 minutes off, 15 minutes off, who knows, So anyway, we did that rectification for her. We corrected it. And we found out that she didn't go to her Jupiter line. She went to her Mars line. And she was doing a mechanical job, riding her bicycle. It was at a university because she thought it was a Jupiter experience, but Jupiter was over in California. So it's like it was still correct, but she, had the wrong time. So it's so important not only for location, but also for timing of other events in one's life. Yeah, you really need to have a chart that really works. So we'll take a look at the given time. Then we take a look at early events, age 5, age 7, age 15. And with that time, it should happen at those particular ages. And if it doesn't, we have to change the time.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
that's how it works.
Yeah. And if you're born, like your birth certificate or whatever, you've been told that your birth time is right on the hour or right on a half hour, chances are it's not exact, right?
Right.
Chances are that it needs to be adjusted, if sometimes, if only a little. But I've certainly known people who said, I was born in the morning. My mom told me I was born in the afternoon or whatever. My grandmother mentioned I was born, when the sun was setting or in the middle of the night. Or when you get something like that, it becomes really obvious that a rectification could serve you well. But so much of what we do, it really is the foundation, is an accurate birth chart. And with an accurate birth chart, everything that comes forward from there becomes that much more relevant. And so this is a technique that I know so many people can use personally, but certainly with those you might serve in your practice of astrology, you will absolutely come across people who could use some of this technique, could use a little bit or maybe a whole lot of fine tuning. And how wonderful that you're going to be teaching these, really simple ways to grasp and begin to implement some of these techniques to help others and yourself that much more.
Yes, yes. And even people who have been working with their own horoscope for years, just being given, something from the birth certificate, thinking, well, the birth certificate must be correct. Well, it's really great, when you have that as compared with sometime in the morning. It's like, oh my goodness, that is so vague. But if you even have something that is officially correct, but if it hasn't been working and things haven't been quite right, with predictions and so forth, it's like, well, maybe it's time to take a look at that and see if it really is a correct chart.
Once again, everybody, Stephen Poplin is coming to Synchronicity University as part of the November 2025 speaker series. And as this is publishing, you've got just a little time left to choose your tuition rate, as low as just $5 a class, as part of the Synchronicity University mandate to make quality astrology available to the masses. And you can see here, we've got great quality in store. Stephen, thank you so much for being here. I've loved talking to you. I've loved your insights. Just thank you.
My pleasure. It's really a great meeting you, and you are a star yourself.
Oh, thank you, Stephen. And thank you, everybody out there, for watching. Until we connect again, take care. Bye.